We now declare the Department and Agency Subcommittee now in session. It's Wednesday, February the 15th, and we're in hearing room 2, and it's about 9:02. Lisa, take the roll, please.
Representative Beck.
Here.
Representative Bricken.
Here.
Representative Carringer.
Present.
Representative Chisholm.
Here.
Representative Hastings. Representative Kiesling. Representative Littleton. Chairman Holtzclaw.
Present.
Chairman Holtzclaw, you have a quorum.
Thank you there. A little cloudy from last night, Lisa. Wow. Let's do a little housekeeping here before we get started. So if somebody's waiting on a particular bill, it may give them an insight. Item number 2, HB 931, has been rolled 1 week by McKenzie. Item number 5, HB 119, is rolled 2 weeks by Ritchie. And item HB 0265 is rolled 2 weeks. And then we're going to, due to committee requirements, we're going to roll HB 1001 up to number 2. So with further ado, we have HB 374 by Marsh. We got a motion and a second, so you're ready to go, Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This bill is from the Secretary of State's office. We have a representative of the Secretary of State, Mike Harmon. We also have a representative of the Sports Wagering Advisory Council, Mary Beth Thomas, who used to be with the Secretary of State. So we're honored to have them here today.
She moved on up, didn't she?
I think so. Before I get started, I'd like a personal privilege, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
You've always got a personal privilege.
I've got my sister, Susan Mayfield, and my brother, Mike Mayfield, from Giles County visiting today.
Good.
Thank you.
She seems much prettier and younger than you.
She is. Mr. Chairman, this, like I said, is from the Secretary of State's office to transfer oversight of the fantasy sports from the Secretary of State's office to the Sports Wagering Advisory Council. With this passage of the Sports Gaming Act, it makes sense to move the regulatory oversight of fantasy sports to the Sports Wagering Advisory Council to take advantage of the efficiencies from centralized regulation of sports wagering and fantasy sports. In fact, several companies currently offer both a fantasy sport platform and a sports wagering platform. The regulatory transition will not disrupt fantasy sport operators or affect players who enjoy participating in fantasy sport contests. This bill does not create any new fantasy sport games, and it does not expand sports wagering. It does not change the way taxes are collected on fantasy sports. It only transfers regulations of fantasy sports. With that, I appreciate your consideration.
Members, we have any questions for you're recognized, Representative Beck.
Thank you, Speaker Marsh. Thank you for being here. Always great to see you and your beautiful family. Quick question, and that came to me yesterday. Secretary of State explained this. It's a great bill, but one question I didn't ask is I know how successful our sports betting has been, just one of the models for the country, but how much does the fantasy generate in dollar-wise? I forgot to ask that question. Do you have any idea?
I've got all kind of notes here, but do we know that, Michael? Can we?
Sure. We'll step out of session and get some info. If you would, state your name and who you're with.
Good morning, Michael Harmon, the General Counsel for the Tennessee Secretary of State's office. We don't have those figures here today, Representative, but I can get them for you and send them to the committee.
Thank you. I was just curious at what the size of the fantasy. I don't do fantasy football or any of the fantasy teams, but I was just curious because I know a lot of people do.
We will have that for you by the end of the week, Representative.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Representative Rickon.
Just for the record, are there currently 15 licensed, I guess, gambling vendors? Is that the number?
For the Sports Wagering Advisory Council, I would want to defer to
Yeah.
them for that.
Sure.
If you would, state your name and who you're with for the record.
Mary Beth Thomas, Director of the Sports Wagering Advisory Council. We currently have 12 licensed vendors, operators, and 11 of them are live.
Okay. Do you expect that to grow, or is that kind of the market?
We currently have 2 pending applications for operator licenses. One is very close to the finish line. One is still being vetted. So I anticipate we'll have 2 more this year. Mm-hmm. What the future holds, I don't know.
And I understand from the Secretary of State he doesn't have an exact number. Do you have an approximate amount of annual gaming revenue?
So I do not, and I'll tell you why I don't know. For sports wagering, our office oversees the collection of privilege tax revenue. Fantasy sports collection of privilege tax revenue is handled by the Department of Revenue. So it doesn't flow through the Secretary of State's office, and that would not change moving over to our office either. I believe at one point when I looked at it earlier in the year, it was somewhere around, I hate to even speculate. The tax structure is different at 6% as opposed to sports betting, which is 20%.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you.
What fee do they actually pay to become one of these?
well, for sports wagering, the fee is $750,000 a year. For fantasy, the fee has a slight, unless the rules have changed, which I don't believe they have. The fee has a sliding scale, and it's dependent on their level of contest that they offer and how much they're generating as far as customers and stuff like that. But the maximum, I believe, is $75,000.
Okay, because I think it's generated a lot more than we ever anticipated it generating, correct?
Sports betting, yes, it's been very popular. Last year, for the calendar year of 2022, Tennesseans wagered $3.8 billion total.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go back in session. Question has been called. Those in favor of HB 374 say aye. Aye. Opposed? Bill moves on to full.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Next up is HB 1018 by Grills. We have a motion and second, so you're properly before us. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill was brought to me by TWRA. It just takes care of some antiquated rules and some antiquated language. It deals with fees that are set by rule now rather than law. It takes care of the creel limit on private lakes, with private property. The bill deletes the fee for slat baskets that are actually set by rule now. Relative to Reelfoot Lake, this bill deletes antiquated provisions of law that presumes that vessels employed in the ordinary purposes of commerce are steam and sail vessels. Yeah, it's a little bit old. And the bill deletes a section of code that is still referred to as hunting as a privilege rather than a constitutional right, which Tennessee Constitution now protects. I renew my motion.
We have questions for Representative Grills? Seeing none, we're voting on HB 1018. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Bill
Thank
moves
you,
on to
committee.
full.
Have a good day.
Which brings us back to item number 3, HB 0671 by Johnson. We have a motion and second, so you're properly before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and I would like to ask for a roll call vote.
That's fine.
Okay. What this bill does is charitable organizations that provide child care, if they're independent of a religious organization, that means they're not a church-run organization. This is about daycares. And we have a serious issue certainly in my county and across the state with daycares being waitlisted 2 years, that sort of thing. One of the concerns with a particular group of daycare that are nonprofit but not religious is that they are the only group of daycares required to get an outside audit that usually runs them about $10,000. If you're familiar with the daycare business, there's not a whole lot of money to be made because of all the overhead, all the problems. There's a great daycare top-rated in Knoxville in my district called Little Oaks, and they're housed in St. Mary, next to St. Mary's Hospital, the old St. Mary's Hospital that used to be where the nuns lived, and they are only operating on the bottom floor, and they take 100 kids. But if they were not under the guise of this and could operate just with filing all the same information on their 990s, on their taxes, which they are required to do, it's the same information that's in the audit, they would be able to add 50 to possibly 100 more kids at the daycare for families. And, you know, we're about to have a situation where our fire and police and a lot of people are housed in that old hospital. So it would be really helpful to our community, but it's something that goes on across the state. There are about 100 of these types of facilities across the state. So removing that burden of that outside audit, that they are the only daycares that are required to do this, would be a huge help to them in staying open. There are some that are struggling to stay open because of this cost and burden, and then there are some that could expand if they didn't have the burden of that cost. So I renew my motion.
Do we have questions? Representative Bricken, you are recognized.
In reviewing the bill, it doesn't mention the audit requirement. It mentions just the exemption from filing, I guess, with the Secretary of State.
Correct.
But it changes the department, and that's where the problem lies. That's why they're the way that they're categorized, they're the only entity that falls under that. So it moves where they fall under in order to move that requirement.
All right.
That when they move it there, it automatically removes that requirement. It's just categorized under a different category.
So who will they won't file at all?
They will file in their taxes that 990, and all the information, all the exact same information that's in their audit is on that 990.
Yeah, but
the church organizations don't file at all. The other daycare organizations are not required to file at all either. These are the only folks required to get an outside audit that is private and that they have to pay for. The only one.
Okay.
Other questions? Seeing none, we're voting on HB 671. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Oh, you requested roll call vote.
That's it.
Okay, Lisa, take the vote.
Representative Beck? Aye. Representative Bricken?
Aye.
Representative Carringer? Aye. Representative Chisholm? Aye. Representative Haston? Representative Holsclaw?
Aye.
Representative Kiesling? Representative Littleton? Aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you. The vote can count.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Your bill moves on to full. Which brings us to the last item on the list, and I'm going to do something that won't surprise somebody. So I'm going to pass the gavel, since this is my bill, to Chairman Carringer. We're going to see how in tune you are.
Not too well. I didn't even get the microphone
You
turned
don't
on.
need to
I
turn it
don't
on. We
need
can-
it.
yeah,
I
was
know
gonna say,
that.
You don't need it.
Oh, the love is shown up here, isn't it? Okay, we're on agenda number 7 item, House Bill 0145 by Chairman Hosklaw.
Second.
145. Is that correct? Phew, made me nervous. He won't ever let me have this job again. Phew. Okay, you have a first and a second, Chairman Hosklaw. We got the motion and second, so you're ready to roll.
Thank you. HB 145 is basically a Secretary of State bill that we've done for several years now, and we have to do it every year. But the main thing this bill does, it reduces the fee from $25 to $10 on charitable functions. Also, it caps a late fee that can go up to $600 to $300. And then it also creates a little transparency on these charities that raise money for disaster relief. And that's basically the bill in a nutshell.
Okay, has anyone got any questions for Chairman Hosklaw?
Question on the bill.
Question?
Okay, no questions. So we will proceed with the vote. All in favor of House Bill 0145, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. And your bill will move on to full state. Chairman Hosklaw, thank you very much.
Thank you, committee members. And that concludes our calendar. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved.